All right. Good evening, everyone. This is a regular meeting of the Gilman Square Civic Advisory Committee. I am going to share my screen so we can take a look at the agenda. Then I think, hang on, it's looking like it wants to share your screen. Make presenter. There we go. Show my screen. Apologies, I've got two screens today, so. All right, I think, can folks see my screen then?
Yep. Yes.
I'll make it much bigger. Not that big. Okay. So pull up the agenda and just do a quick round of technical checks and attendance. So first person on my list over here is Diana Marsh. You just don't mind saying here so we can check your mics are connected?
Yes, I am here.
Wonderful. Melinda?
Sorry, yes, I'm here.
Perfect. Ram?
Yes, I'm here.
Fantastic. Casey? Casey, do you mind just saying your names or saying hello so we can make sure your mic's working?
Sorry, it took me a second to find the little audio thing, but I'm here.
Hey, okay. Perfect. And Ram, your microphone is much better today, so that's great.
Okay.
Jack? I saw Jack enter.
Can you hear me now?
We can. Perfect.
Okay.
James, I believe, is going to be a no. Lisa? I see Lisa on the list. Lisa, do you want to check in and see if you can unmute?
Hi, it's Lisa.
Perfect. Jamie?
Yes, at the exact moment, a giant pop-up went over the mic button. I'm here.
Perfect. Jennifer?
Yep, I'm here.
Awesome. Brittany? Don't see Brittany here. She was on our walk though. Michelle?
Here.
Excellent. Ben Elgart? Ben, I see Ben in our attendee list, so hopefully we will get Ben connected. I'll send him a quick email. Councillor Klingon?
Present.
Perfect. I heard you speak before, and Councillor Young-Campen is not able to join us today. Fantastic. So we have a very large group here today. So first thing on the agenda is to just check in on the previous meeting summary that we set from July. Any thoughts, questions, changes anyone would like to see made before we publish it to the website? All right, hearing none, we'll get that uploaded right away. Next up, we do have space for public comment. If there's anyone in the public who would like to make a comment, we will also have public comment again at the end. If there's anything you see on this agenda that you'd like to react to, we will definitely catch you at the end as well. But if there's anyone who would like to make a comment, I will just quickly review the buttons that you should be seeing. You have two choices for members of the public. There's a raise hand function. It looks like a little hand. And there's also a questions box. So you can always type in a question to that as well. Right, I'm not seeing anybody at the moment, but Ben, are you?
No, I'm not either.
Okay, great. And so we will come back to the members of the public if they've got any questions later on. Or thoughts, it doesn't have to be a question. So then the first thing we had on our agenda for today was just to reflect back and record any notes folks had from our site walk last month. We ended up having great weather for those of you who weren't able to join us. This was that day that was horribly rainy and disgusting. And then all of a sudden, just as we were about to start walking, it was gorgeous. So we did send around the notes that Max, who attended from the public, was able to, did that make it around, I think, to everybody? Max took some very detailed notes on our walk. So I hope that was helpful for everyone in sort of jogging your memories.
I don't think I saw it. When did it come around?
It should have been in the email that was sent on Monday or Tuesday, but if you did not receive that email, please let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Ben took, Max took a ton of very detailed notes, but I wanted to make sure we leave space here also to capture sort of reflections of the group to what we saw out there. So I have several spaces here and just wanted to sort of curious what people have sort of thought about or what they were thinking when we were out walking. If there's anything that came to mind that we should make sure we take note of for our future selves. Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, one thing that we noticed on the walk is that like when you're standing on School Street and looking down into the site from just next to the train station platform, it looks like it wouldn't be that hard to connect like a staircase at least to the School Street sidewalk from down in the site. Currently the area that's like behind the gas station building. So if we can't have some big elaborate, moving staircase or something that gets up and over the train tracks from directly inside the site, at a minimum, maybe at least there could be a staircase from the site up to School Street. And then you could walk down the sidewalk like 20 feet and go into the station there. It would just be like a little bit faster than having to go all the way down along Medford and then up School Street. So that's like another option we could remember to look out for.
I think, Ram, you had something you were aiming to say too, right?
Yeah, I was also thinking about connectivity to Medford Street, and we got a sense of how hard it was, how far away it was, and all the difficulties with the electric lines, and so the tunnel seemed like a interesting possibility that's feasible at all.
I can add a thought. I feel like there was a continued realization of the steepness, triangular green space there. Yeah, and the bridges also.
Is that about right?
Yeah.
Did anyone find out if the football field is still on track?
The football field is on track, but it will definitely take into next year.
Okay.
But it is progressing. It's looking more and more like a like a something. At least from City Hall view.
We talked a little on the sidewalk about access from the bike path to school, high school. I don't think it's not necessarily related to the police station, but something that someone should be thinking about, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good note. I don't have a picture. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Sorry, another thing I noticed about Medford, maybe I hope somebody didn't just say this, is that the traffic goes pretty fast down the hill. The cars kind of come barreling down Medford Street. And I think where we were standing, there was also no on-street parking. So we were like really close to these cars whizzing by and it didn't feel very comfortable along there. So maybe that's an argument for changing it back to pedestrian space. I don't know. Just notice the fast traffic.
I guess related to that too, I think at that intersection, we also noticed that it was almost like the Pearl, I think coming in that doesn't have the right of way almost felt like almost like that should maybe be the one with the right of way. It's really difficult to like turn back pretty far angle to check for the traffic coming down the bridge.
Yeah, and I mean, I can confirm that just having done it again today, coming out of the Mad Oyster parking lot. Yeah, we noted that, and we also noted that because I checked with you, Sarah, and you meant, sorry, day job. I checked with you, Rachel, and you said that the idea was that the primary right-of-way was Medford onto Pearl, and that Medford continuing was supposed to be the ancillary thing, whereas the way that it's structured now, it's 100% that straight shot, and that Pearl ending there is very much the turn. So they would have to, regardless of whatever else gets done, if they're going to keep Medford Street open, keep the bridge open to car traffic, they've got to redesign that intersection, because right now it's a nightmare. Whether you're walking across Pearl, because of the angle at that point, that crosswalk is super, super wide. Because it's not just straight across the street, it's actually at an angle to the opposite corner. So it feels just that much longer.
Interesting visibility challenges. I'm going to shift to the next slide just so we have more space. I think we have, yes, Ben, I can get you in now. One moment. All right, Jack, were you going to say something? Any other thoughts?
The only other thing I can think of to add is there were like at various vantage points, a few different people remarked on some of the like natural beauty of the space, whether it was like nature or some of like the older buildings. And I think there was a desire to maintain that, or like, I guess maintain it is the right word. So that came up a few different times.
Or even enhance it. I think this has been Elgar, the cathedral down Medford Street was a nice visual anchor down that way, and it'd be nice to feel connected to it when in Gilman Square. Kind of riffing off that, when we were on the bridge on School Street, we noticed how cavernous the right-of-way for the trains was, and how we're going to see a lot of backside of buildings most likely in the future. At that point, we were just saying that the buildings should be cognizant of that being a face to the public. But I'd go further and say there's an opportunity for that to speak to people on the train platform, and invite people to whizzing by on trains or maybe on the commuter rail who aren't stopping, to let them know that they're coming through an energetic communal space, and entice them to explore more. So not connecting the dots, well, probably connecting the dots too far. I know we were lamenting where art can go in public spaces, and that might be a great way to engage people and invite them into the neighborhood.
So I'll just add what Jennifer was saying sort of as well from in the chat, is that thinking about also the fact that this is going to be happening in Union Square, where open space at Union Square sort of looks into the space and art connection.
I'm trying to understand Ben's vision. Is it like art, or is it a bit of an advertisement, or kind of a bit of both? You say this is
all the above. I mean, we know that there's going to be architecture built. We know that there'll be space to have artistic elements, and some of that might be messaging. We could have signage, about community events. I don't know, whatever. So many directions to go in.
Rob, how I interpreted what Ben was saying is that it's about that when let's say someone's on the commuter rail and on their way out to Fitchburg and they're passing Gilman Square, they should see something that says, man, that's a cool place. I want to come back here and have dinner, or, come back for coffee or wander around or buy a piano, something that pulls them to say, oh yeah, this is a place I want to come. Am I getting that right, Ben?
Yeah, that's great.
Another thing that I noticed on the tour was, like, when you're standing on Medford looking up at the site, it's just such a cool view of the terracing of the train tracks, and then the high school and city hall above that. And some of us were saying that it would be nice if the new buildings could not block that view, or not entirely block it, and maintain some kind of peekaboo views through to those, all the terracing of the soccer field and the buildings, because it's really just really cool to look at.
Right.
All hidden away.
And to follow up, I think actually, Diana, you and I were talking about how one of the ways that it could do that, and we talked about this before the site walk as well, how to preserve the walkability of the open space there, have, kind of a step back, have the first few floors be all the way out to the edges, but then have a step back for any of the taller floors, and maybe even if it's deep enough, a second setback for the closest to the train tracks, so that you do have the breadth of that view available to you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I'm going to get this right, Jennifer, so please correct me as I type this note.
I would say use tiered building, setbacks for higher floors.
Jennifer, do you mean setbacks like stepping back from Medford Street, or as you're looking south to City Hall, it would step back kind of like a...
No, setbacks have the widest part of the building be the Medford Street side and then at the ground level, and then on the Medford Street side, have it step back to, but it could also kind of like go into a corner, I guess, but I don't know which corner. Like, I just think, yeah, some combination of all of that. And again, as Diana said, having it be, it doesn't have to be consistent. It could be if they have enough space to do kind of two different things, do it that way. We talked about sky bridges and how maybe a sky bridge over to the other side of the community path, et cetera. Like just lots of different, I feel like there's enough airspace there that they have options, or that a really creative designer would have options on what to put in there and how to take the most advantage of that airspace as opposed to just filling it with a block of building.
I'm gonna start a new page. Any more thoughts? I think one thing that came out was, depending on what happens with the triangle piece, if it were to stay open space, I think when we were standing on Medford Street, a couple people were saying, could that be opened up? Because there's a guardrail right now between the top of the sort of the sloped green space and the street. And a few people were saying, from the pedestrian perspective, that means you can't get into Medford Street. You can't get into that green space from Medford. And so can that be managed differently?
I would say related to that, like there's the staircase that goes through the triangle from Pearl up to Medford, but it's pretty narrow, and that's kind of the only flat area in that triangle site. So, without removing any of the trees that are there now, it seems like you could add a little bit more of kind of like landings and seating areas up and down that staircase, make the staircase more into a wider space that is more like something where you might just like sit on one of the stairs and people watch, or you might go off to the side and sit on like a low wall or something. Just so that green space can be enjoyed by more people. Because the staircase is so narrow, it's just like a way to pass through it. You can't stop and be in the green space, you can only be on the edge of it. So, if you could have a little seating area in the middle, halfway up the hill, it would be really cool.
Rachel, or everybody, I just wanted to say that I don't know how this factors. We have the Gilman Square neighborhood plan, but I don't really think that it really had the vision of like what you can kind of see that could come together down there in the square. So I feel like if we have some consensus on, like for instance, the Winter Hill neighborhood plan the Winter Hill neighborhood plan has the 299 Star Market site one way, but as a community, we've sort of feel like come together and feel like there's certain boxes that need to be checked up there. So what I'm hearing from everybody is kind of like there's a few things that we can make sure within our power, whether it's because we're not going to have, depending on how things go, if we take the mobile or whatever, working with developers, it'd be nice to have like a direction, certain things that we can come to a consensus to that we can make sure to see. Because I agree with everybody, what everybody's saying. There's so much potential. It's like there's such beautiful views, whether you're up at City Hall or whether you're at the top of Medford Street. And it's like, how do we harness this and guide this development so that we can make a really beautiful space that people want to stop on the train and people want to visit often. So that's kind of really, I missed the walk, but I know the area, and I appreciate all of you getting out there.
Yeah, thanks, Counselor. I think that's really the goal of this group, is going to be to think about where are those consensus points? What are we all finding? And then to make sure we're checking back in with the broader community, and confirming that we haven't missed anything as we go through this process of narrowing into what guidance do we give a developer when we have a development partner on this site? Because it's a complex one, that is for sure.
Regarding the triangle space, I mean, it's not a done deal that even stays green space, right? It could conceivably be a building at some point.
It could, yeah, and I think that's one of the questions to think about. I know I'll write that down, that there was some notice about the trees, you know, so folks were noticing. I remember people talking about the you know, we're looking pretty attractive that day.
Was anything said? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, but it's really, it's a question, right? And so one of the things that had been in the last round of conversations was that, you know, maybe that is a good space to build something, maybe, you know, something like what was there in the 19th century, and then to move the green space to the flat part of the home and site so that we get a broader flat space. TBD.
But of course, then we start with small trees.
Right. But the other thing we noticed while we were there is that, so there was a building there in the 19th century, early 20th century, but that was before the bridge, that was before the train tracks that necessitated the bridge. And one of the things I forget who I chatted with about this is that the difference in grade, because of the bridge, because of the Medford Street Bridge, the difference in grade from the back, from the Medford Street side of that triangle to the Pearl Street side of that triangle is like at least a story, if not a story and a half. So putting a building in there would have to take that grade into account. And it's not to say that it can't be done, but like there couldn't be any delivery to or back of the building egress off of that, whatever that first floor is. So I don't know what kind of safety zoning would be required to have that be an occupiable space. And I think that was something that we hadn't thought about as far as a restriction on what could be built there. So that was one of the things that really jumped out when because you know, I'm at Mad Oyster. I'm across from that all the time. But when I actually stood there and looked at it from the perspective of, could a building be built on this spot? It would take a really interesting bit of architectural work to be a viable building for that first floor and a half. So yeah, I don't know what I don't even know. I couldn't even speculate, but it would take real thought to put something there.
Jack, am I going to get this right? That was also a car lot you had said, right? Am I getting that correct? That like between when it was a 3-story building and now there was a car lot on that spot.
Well, that's what I remember, but I could be wrong. I mean, I went looking on the computer and I couldn't see anything that signified a car lot, but I thought there was one there.
So I think the train tracks were always there, right? Because it was the Winter Hill station, but the bridge wasn't there, so the grade wasn't like.
I can go back to find the photo again, and this is a good research project that we can take on and try and figure out what that detailed history might look like. Because the photo that we do have very clearly shows it fronted onto Pearl Street. And I think it was just a brick wall at the back. And it may not have gone all the way to whatever was back, like, but we can do some archive searching and see if we can find some more details about what its condition is.
The other thing I was wondering was the, what is it called? The substation, that gray building, was that discussed at all, and what we could possibly do to, I think there's an art project maybe to make it more attractive, but even to enclose it or hide it from view, but I don't know what's possible.
Yeah, I wanted to also talk a bit about the substation as well, because I know that there had been an effort to put art directly on it with the support of MBTA, and I think even without their support, there are considerations around different angles. So for instance, from the home insight building, what could maybe block view of that? If there are changes to Medford Street, is there a way to, I don't know, change the sidewalk and push it out and then use public space to, you know, again, shroud it? I don't know if there are other opportunities besides partnering directly with MBTA to either, to do other stuff around it. But I think we should put that on the table.
Yeah, Rachel. I was just going to jump in and say that to that point. Yeah, I mean, there's been times where like the ABJ site at one point was sort of the developer owner was working with the city, and you know, I'm just making an example of like in that same vein of what you're talking about, what Ben's talking about, is that they were going to reconfigure the street so that like Pearl Street became more of like you had to turn off of it instead of like merging. So again, I'm not saying that that's a good idea or that that's ideal. I'm just saying that we do have an opportunity to reconfigure this square in a way that makes more sense and makes it way less dangerous. So I definitely want to put that on the high priority list.
And even from like up, like further up on the bridge, I think the other part about it is like, I think the art conversation had been like where the art working with the MBTA would be displayed, but maybe like from the bridge also, how do we not look at a substation? You know, I think considering like it as a 360 problem and not just as a one plane problem might help us also think creatively about how it's not a problem, but an opportunity.
Yeah, so the artwork that is, the Arts Council has been going through a process to select an artist to turn that into basically a mural location. And that mural would actually circle, I think it's on 3 sides that's proposed to be mural of the TPSS structure. We have been hearing from the MBTA that there's a rethink on their approach to art. We are trying to understand the details of that and how that might affect this particular piece, because this was the TPSS building having art on it is part of the Green Line deal. We're trying to figure out how this all ties in terms of timing of the new approaches that they're taking at the T. So it's an ongoing conversation, but the Arts Council has been working to find an artist. They've selected someone, and I've seen it, but I'm like losing my words to describe it at the moment. But it is something that is in the works to hopefully happen sooner than later.
One other, I agree with all that about trying to hide that building, because it's also just like it's got a chain link fence around it, and it's just very utilitarian with like the trucks and the driveway and the chain link fence. And so even beyond like the building looking beautiful, the grounds are very industrial looking. And then I wanted to make another point about that intersection that's so dangerous when you're trying to turn from Pearl onto Medford. I mean, it might be that the city would try to realign Pearl Street to come in more closer to a 90-degree angle to Medford, and then that I think would need to take part of the tip of that triangle, the triangle green space. I mean, I don't know if they're going to do that or not, but that's what is often done when you try to make the intersection more of a 90-degree intersection, and then take part of that triangle. But then it would free up more space, like in front of the piano building, maybe for like a bump out or something like that. So that geometry might change. I don't know if that's already part of the plan for Medford Street or Pearl Street.
Yeah, so I'm seeing Councilor Klingen's note in the chat also that that's what he was sort of talking about. Could there be a realignment? The city has had a grant to look at this, and so that is one aspect that we want to bring forward in a community meeting, is just to catch everyone up about where they are. It's not a complete design, but it's a mid-level, like mid-stage engineering. So they've looked at things like what the grade issues are, about how Medford Street comes into that section. And so they've got some details there, and it would be, I think we need to do another, we're at a good point here, I think, to bring that back to the rest of the Gilman Square community, and also to you all, and make sure that we're all on the same page about where that stands. Michelle, you had something.
Yeah, so I just have a point of information because I drive down that Medford Street every day. So there's actually a new walking intersection. So right after the triangle, there seems to be some kind of path that I think it comes up from the Leathers Park. So a lot of the kids, it's not open yet, but it will be open soon. I saw a fence there, but I do see a lot of kids crossing there in the morning. And that's almost directly right after you take that left from Pearl Street onto Medford Street. And it just kind of seems a little bit of a cluster because as you have people turning, you have people crossing.
Okay,
I think
that's
this meant to be the path continuation, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's
It's
what I was going to say.
Tricky as a
coming from
cyclist.
the other side. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It's connecting to Medford Street, and the other path is on the is up on School Street. So
yeah, that's the community path extension.
yeah, it's
Yeah, so I'm wondering.
where it is looks a little bit dangerous.
I
And
was
that would be
actually,
quite busy.
yeah, when I noticed that, I was wondering when they were planning on installing the light, because that, I can't imagine that as a community path that's being used by commuters and kids and everybody on that stretch of Medford, with people coming down over that bridge the way they do, and have that not be a complete disaster without a light at that crosswalk. But yeah.
I would bring that to our team who's working on Green Line and community path coordination, just so that make sure they're aware of that immediately, because now is the time to take a look and see if there's additional safety measures that could be implemented. Are there more comments? I can add another page and we can keep going. The other things we have on this agenda are to talk really about this next community meeting and some scheduling. So we've got plenty of time. We can also come back to this if we want to go to that and then come back.
I had a quick question about the community path. Are there plans to have lights at where the path intersects major streets like school?
That I don't know. I can pose that to our mobility team. I don't believe so, but I do not know. And I believe I'm sure it's also different depending on where along the path we're talking.
And actually, related to all of that, do we have updates on when all that's going to open up? Or, what's the last, in the notes that Max made, it was still November, but we're basically at November, so.
We have not gotten an update of the timeline beyond that. So we're still anticipating any day now a date will be announced.
I saw somewhere, but I can't remember where it was, that the Green Line's going to open in November and the path is going to open in January. And I'm sorry, I can't remember where the reference there I found is, but that's what I saw.
So I'll just repeat that, Ram, just because you were cutting out a little bit there, but basically what Ram was saying is that he had seen that it is, that there's, and I concur, I can say yes, that I have heard this is the same thing as well, that yes, the community path the Green Line service would open in November is still what they've been saying. but that the path might happen a little bit later. And I think that's one of the things that's still being figured out, and probably why the date is still not certain, because there's some sections of the path that serve as the entrance to the stations and some sections of the path that are separate. And so I'm sure that's part of what's being sorted out right now. But that the path could, their contract is that the path can follow a little bit later on in the process, if it's not fully complete, getting service going being more of a priority. Did I miss anything, Ron?
Yeah, I just want to say that one of the most exciting things on our walk was to see the test train running on the tracks. That was fun.
Yeah, those test trains are pretty exciting. It's getting close. It's feeling like they're going to actually be a train we can walk onto. I did notice actually yesterday even that the sign at the School Street side is lit today. There's now, you can see a light up, nice bright white lit MBTA sign. This is going to be the T. We're close. Still wish we had it open in time for our walk. It's all right. What I might suggest is that we talk about schedule, and then we can come back to this if there's more thoughts that come as people keep thinking. How's that sound? All right, I'm seeing some nodding. So I realized we made point number 4 on our agenda, scheduling a community meeting, and point number 5 being a look ahead at the fall and winter. In some ways, it's worth taking these things together. So I wanted to show where we were. This is what we had at our last meeting, and where we were virtual in July. That we canceled in our August meeting because it was the last week of August and everybody was getting ready for back to school and on vacation. In September, we had our walk. Our goal for today was to talk about this planning for a community workshop and bigger meeting. And then the main reason I want to bring this up is that November and December, because of the schedule we are on, where we're at the end of the month, our dates land on Thanksgiving Day and just before the Christmas holiday. So what I wanted to sort of take a look at is, if we take a look at a calendar, thinking about trying to fit in a community meeting that's broader than just the committee, but really inviting in everyone to do sort of a bigger update of what have we all been talking about, and have also some updates on where we are with Green Line, where we are on the community, the Medford Pearl design, talk that through, where things are in the stormwater elements, because that has made a lot of progress in terms of their thinking. That should sort of, where do we fit that in the calendar? And then the follow-up question being, do you all want to have a meeting still at the end of December following a community meeting, or would you rather hold until January? So in terms of getting a community meeting together, where we're seeing things realistically is to come in just after Thanksgiving. So thinking about that last week of Thanksgiving falls here on the 24th. So thinking about one of the days in the week of the 28th or the week of the 5th being ideal timing to host a larger community meeting.
Would it be virtual or in person?
I would estimate virtual still, but we could look at it in person as well. My gut says that we stick with virtual for the time being, just because where things are in the cold flu season at the beginning of December. And then maybe think about a spring something in person.
So, Rachel, I have a couple questions about this, because my understanding is that these series of meetings of this committee are really about like collecting and sourcing input, and are a listening mechanism and not really a readout mechanism. And I'm not quite sure if I'm all for community meetings, but I just don't know if this is the right vehicle to do that, because this is not how people are expecting those conversations to happen, to unfold. So don't let me, I just wonder if there are other ways to structure that meeting that aren't under this guise, because I don't know if this is going to get the reach that we want it to have, even if it's geared towards a larger audience.
Yeah, fair point. I think what I was thinking is that sort of like we did when you all were first starting, we did a much broader, we did not call it a Civic Advisory Committee meeting, but we called it a broader Gilman community meeting. And we're talking about, the fact that, what you guys are going to be working on and getting some initial feedback and ideas from a broader audience, but also talked a little bit about where things were on the street design. I think where we are at this point is that we have updates to share from the other teams. And I want to make sure that we are getting that out, not only to you all, but also to the broader community at the same time. And so that was sort of the thinking, that maybe we do, we wanted to make sure you all were brought into our thinking on this, and how we're thinking about engaging with the neighborhood on a broader scale. So we absolutely, any thoughts on meeting structure, happy to hear.
I definitely, just from all of my history of trying to schedule events between the two big winter, these two big winter holidays, I'm inclined to look closer at the week of the 5th, just because people might be coming back from vacation over the Thanksgiving holiday. I'm not getting back until the 28th for my travels, so I definitely, that's my first thought, and I absolutely think virtual is the right answer, because this is the beginnings of really variable weather. So we want to make sure that no matter what the weather is like outside, that people don't have to stay home just because they don't want to bring the kids out in the weather nastiness or whatever, or the cold or what have you. So I definitely think that my vote would be for that week, and absolutely for virtual. And I do agree that that kind of readout model that we used at the community meeting back at the beginning of this is a good one, and I would support that.
I agree that the further away from Christmas is the better. Holiday parties start too, probably even earlier in the week of the 5th, because I don't know when holiday, sometimes it's a Thursday night or Friday night or Saturday night for work and stuff, but yeah, and virtual is definitely better as well.
Michelle, you had your hand up also.
Yeah, I was just going to second, I'll third it now, actually. That after Thanksgiving, a lot of people, they're coming back from the holidays at different times. Everyone is still trying to catch up after being away, because everyone has a short week the week before. So definitely the week of the 5th. I would not make it on a Thursday, because you're right, the holiday parties will have already started by then. So I would definitely do either the Monday through Wednesday. I would say probably the Tuesday or Wednesday too, because people might be coming back off the vacation. So that's what I would guess.
All right. So it's sounding like these are our priority days, would be the 6th, 7th.
Yeah.
Maybe the 5th.
Maybe.
This is all super helpful.
Sorry, Rachel, can you just briefly recap again which of these different topics and projects you think the city would be able to report back on? Because I think, like, we talked about a lot of them more generally at the last public meeting, and I feel like if we're going to have another public meeting, we should be able to give a lot more detailed, findings, and maybe start talking about some new things also, like, how big different building prototypes are, or what's up with the YMCA, things like that, so that we're moving forward with this content.
Yeah, so the big updates are the street design is now at 60%. So there were additional meetings about the street design that is at this point at a pause point in design, and that's really about that Medford Pearl intersection and what does Pearl Street look like. again, it's on pause. We were doing that under a grant. We got as far as the grant could take us. So we are at a pause, but I think we're in good shape to share out where we've landed as far as that engagement work went. The other big piece of information is that the stormwater master plan is going to be having their own separate public meetings, and I'm going to double check these dates and make sure it works. Because the other alternative is, if let's say one of these dates is already these 2 dates are already picked for stormwater meetings, I'd rather we wait until January, so that because the stormwater is really the key driver of what happens, right? We need to understand where we are on this tank timeline situation. They are at a point now where they're ready to report out to the community, but we have to coordinate with those meetings and make sure that team is available to talk about where we are and how it relates to this particular property. But I do know that the timing is right at this point to be thinking about that for end of November, December into January.
Is there any more information about the YMCA or some of the work that I think HRNA was going to be doing about building fitting or building market studies or something?
So yeah, so a little bit, and sort of preview on the HRNA piece is that where we are in exact timing. They're trying to also time with the tank, but where we are at this stage of the game, and I'm sure you all have been seeing this in the news, is that the market is tightening up very, very quickly. There's a lot of volatility because of how things are going with interest rates right now. And so there's a little bit of a hedging that a lot of the development world is doing, which has driven land value down substantially. What that means is that how we think about this site and building on this site, we're not going to be able to find somebody who's going to come in and generate a big for-profit thing. That's probably okay. I think from all the listening we've been doing over the last several months, folks are interested in product and sort of building types that aren't necessarily, lab buildings or 100% market residential. But what that does mean is that as we think about finding development partners, they're going to be a little bit on edge for a bit. It's going to be a little bit trickier to find somebody who's really excited about this site for the moment. So I wanted to sort of preview that with you all. It's because it's not the most exciting news. Not 100% surprising, but not exciting. The other piece you asked about was YMCA. So they've continued to be interested. I do need to sit down with them again in the next few weeks and figure out and learn if they've got any more updates on where they've been, their research and their thinking about the site. We did connect them with the team that we had following us through the spring at RISD. And so they've connected to talk about, the students had some really interesting, cool ideas about, if the YMCA were to be at this location, what would that look like? And so they've at least talked and they're, thinking through some creativity around it.
Rachel, was there also an assessment for supermarket? I think there were some other larger usages that were also being assessed.
Yeah, so coming out of the work with the students, I think in terms of footprint, it's possible, but I think in terms of getting the market conditions for a full-scale supermarket are again kind of on the low end. But that doesn't mean that there may not be interest from our smaller players in the area. Again, thinking about, I need to follow up again with Neighborhood Produce. We tried to connect and then we had a scheduling conflict and it never got back on the calendar. But to understand if they might be interested, when we do eventually have a building here, would they be looking at that point at an expansion? And would this site be exciting to them? Okay, so great. In the works.
Yeah.
Would the city
yeah.
be interested in stepping in and doing development?
That's another piece that we're trying to sort through a little bit as well, is like, if the city were to do development as a leading partner, what could that look like? Part of this, again, it's all tied into the tank. Thus, a lot of the timing of this is that we need to understand how this all relates to flooding. I mean, we all were hearing in our, going out in the neighborhood and talking to folks, flooding came up a lot. I know many of you have mentioned it as well, that you've seen it. Obviously, we had a sinkhole not too long ago as well. So really thinking about how that all plays together. And so that's why we want to really talk it through with everyone. It's sort of like the early knowledge I've heard from the stormwater folks is that, tank still very, very likely, but also not in the immediate, not an immediate thing. So we have to talk it through. There's a lot there to talk about. The other thing that's been in our conversations, we've started to talk a little, I think we've talked about it a little bit here, but we've been talking more and more in the city about this, is that whether we are able to move forward, with development, with new construction, right, a new building, it will take a year to 2 years, or it might take longer than that. But in either case, one of the questions is, we're going to be getting this property back from the T pretty quick. Can we figure out, sort of in a next summer timeline, doing some more exciting things here? Like, could we figure out how to get some food trucks here, or some event activity here, or something like that in a more short order timeline? And one of the thoughts was, with you all involved, if we could brainstorm those ideas with you all as we turn into sort of thinking about that fall winter look ahead, like as we turn into January, February, could we be brainstorming that with you all to talk about what that might look like, and what could be really successful here to meet some of those goals that we saw in the short term, right? Because no matter what, designing, like finding a developer, getting a building, like getting designs planned, these are not fast things, but maybe we could meet some of those goals in terms of like getting a food truck here where you can buy a cup of coffee or a sandwich or a donut. Like, can we bring some of that life to the square?
And there's a local example of that, Boynton Yards, and everything that once has been doing with the Boynton Yards folks over the past year or two has really been, as far as I can tell, has really been successful. I've been to a few events there, and it's a big flat open area. Once sets up a stage at one end, and then they have either food trucks, or I think they've even got some permanent stuff up there now. But yeah, I think that would be deeply exciting. Also, there's out in San Francisco, there's a former fort, like old armory type fort, where it has basically turned into this semi-permanent food truck space. And so they have big long picnic tables that are there, and they've got bathrooms that are available there. Austin, Texas has something like this too that I've been to. And it really, again, there's minimal infrastructure. There's basically power and indoor bathrooms, but that's about it. And then otherwise, it's just the food trucks come in, and then there are the big picnic tables so that people can sit and eat. So yeah, I think there's lots of options for stuff like that.
I also remember when they took the transfer station down in Big Bottom, the Arts Council stepped in and did something called Art Farm. And they had some concerts there. We had to install dance stage and stuff like that. So this could be Art Farm too, maybe.
Yeah, that's actually a concept we've been talking with them about, because there's part of the long-term plan for Art Farm is actually quite similar to the challenges we're facing at the moment with the Stormwater Master Plan. So Art Farm is going to have an underground tank and is part of solving flooding issues in the Union Square area. And so for a little bit, there's going to be construction there. And so one of the questions is, could some of that activity that's been there, is Gilman a good spot for that as an interim basis while we're still thinking through what our long range redevelopment looks like?
Another,
oh, jump in.
sorry. Another project in San Francisco that was really cool was there was a temporary park. I think maybe it was called Playland, that was made out in like the Sunset or Richmond area of San Francisco on a site that was going to be developed, but they had like 5 or 6 years before it was developed. And the city worked with all the neighbors, and there were a lot of kids in the neighborhood, and they made like a super low cost park with all these funky, weird, unusual materials and things to climb on, and put a couple of container trucks in there, and they had power and bathrooms in the container trucks, and they had picnic tables, and it was all really temporary, but it was really cool, and the kids were really invested in it because they had helped design it. And they just took it down like last year because it's finally built. Pop-up park, pop-up playground. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of where we've been thinking is like, what are those opportunities that are really specific to Gilman that make sense here? And, building off of all of the listening that we've done. So what we were hoping is that one of the things that we're looking at is, can we use ARPA funding to jumpstart this and get this really going starting, next year, get some activity going sooner than later. Nothing, long-term permanent right away, but getting, some food trucks and getting some, can we meet some of the needs that the teens brought up, right? About having some space to do their thing. Can we figure out ways to, I don't know, meet the daytime needs that Jamie and her team have of like more lunch choices? See what we can come up with.
There was also a place downtown Brooklyn where they were waiting to develop on a site, and they had like a large like party tent, I think, that was just up all the time with heat lamps under it, and they had like a DJ, and they had kind of semi-permanent food vendors set up under the tent, and you could go there and just eat and hang out, and it was open late at night, and it had like string lights and stuff, so it was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking also like for Gilman Square Neighborhood Association, Ben, I know, I mean, like the party this year turned out really, really well. We figure out how to do some like more series of events, working with you all, bringing in, and this is where also we're sort of thinking about the ARPA ask. Like, does the ARPA ask include also bringing in programming, like not just money for constructing some stuff to like fill it in and make it lively, but also maybe to bring in a programmer who can do, maybe Lisa can be hosting some yoga.
Yes, definitely. A food truck court with yoga in the middle, like we do at Assembly Row.
Yeah, so that's sort of been what we've been thinking about is that, given what we're hearing, we're sort of hearing from the development world and from the stormwater folks that like, this may take more time than less time at the moment. We'll still need to keep making some progress and, continuing to develop the concepts. And just, what we're talking about, what we've been talking about is like really creative, cutting edge, not simple stuff. Right? And so we need to keep building that momentum. But as we continue to build that momentum, seeing if we can meet a bunch of the goals that we've been identifying through all the work you all have been doing. It's sounding like that's feeling okay to folks as a game plan. If anyone disagrees, please let me know.
No, it sounds great. We might even decide we like it better than buildings. So.
Also possible.
I mean, I think right now in Assembly Row, we're only now seeing other developers act on neighboring plots to bring in additional activity. And if that's with, a primary developer who'd been working with the city for a very long time, building quite a lot of buildings, right? And only now the energy is kind of spilling over. I mean, I think we already have developers who are in the neighborhood who aren't able to kind of get liftoff. So the idea that this, which is a lot more elaborate, requiring multiple parcels and more comprehensive planning, would, you know, pick up in even a couple years, I think would be very ambitious, would be lovely, but also didn't seem in line with all the goals that we have as a community. So I think it does make a lot more sense to think that if we really want to have a really good fit, then it would take more time to line everything up.
And I think we mentioned this way back at the beginning, that this also offers an opportunity to see what sticks, like what do people show up for, and, you know, use it as a test ground for what kinds of businesses or what's the word I'm looking for? Not facilities, but things that improve, things that aren't necessarily businesses, but generally make the neighborhood better, like the parks or the seating or the music area or the, you know, playground or whatever. And that, you know, this also, Diana was mentioning the kids being invested. I mean, this would be a prime thing to do with the high schoolers. And okay, teens, what can we put here that you will A, feel engaged with and want to come to, and also B, won't, and I do this out of deep love and years of working with teens, and won't destroy. Like, you know, what's that sweet spot? What can we get you to come in and want to keep using in that meaningful way? And I do genuinely say that with deep love for teenagers. I adore them. But it's true facts. They can be hard on the scenery in a literal sense.
This is really helpful. So I think what we're going to try and do is, as a staff team, is take a crack at a couple of sketches of, like, just to get people, as we put together this presentation for the broader community, just to put together a couple of sketches that show, you know, like, it could be like this, it could be like that, it could be like that. And just to sort of lay out, one of the things we're trying to understand also is with our partners, like, what are the accessibility challenges that we need to make sure we're thinking about? Because we're going to have a gravel lot, and gravel is not the most accessible surface. So, like, how much can we pave, you know, carefully, and how do we put this all together? But with the goal being that, you know, that we have something as a starting point, just as a starting point, and that we spend the winter months with you all working through what this could really be. And then in parallel to that, we're going to try and work through the ARPA process we have to still work with the ARPA team to understand how much detail they need to meet federal standards. Because what we'd love to do is not have a ton of detail and be able to get the funding in place so that, you know, come March-ish, we have a partner who can help us really implement, and we have the funding in place to hit the ground running and, like, do some collaborative construction, or, you know, whatever it might be, you know, set up that programming, and, you know, working with Lisa and working with, you know, Jamie and her team at Paradigm, and John, like, and James at the piano shop, and the high school students, and everybody who, you know, all of you and all of our partners and neighbors figure out some awesome stuff. And then we also sort of, once we get that launched, then come back to the sort of bigger picture game plan. That's kind of where we're thinking things might land, if that feels comfortable for everyone. That, like, we spend a few months, get an implementer involved on the short term, get some really cool stuff going, and then see where we are in terms of the timing of picking up, you know, what do we need to how do we keep things moving on the long-term plan.
Rachel, one other thing for me to add, our monthly meeting for the Gilman Square Neighborhood Association will be Monday the 5th. So either should be smart to overlap and leverage people who are regularly showing up, or at the very least, we can announce another meeting for the 5th, 6th, or 7th in advance and maybe highlight some of the things as they're known, even if it's in just a overview. But we should somehow make sure to coordinate the communications, if not the meetings.
Yeah, definitely. What I'm thinking here is that we're going to try and target the 6th, 7th, see if we can pull that off. If not, I am curious what folks think about actually looking into like the early part of January, not right after the holiday, but like, does that feel comfortable in terms of timeline for folks? I don't want to like rush and be annoying for folks in this season, but at the same time, I also want to make sure we're being responsive and getting, giving the updates in a timely fashion.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so we'll aim for the 6th, 7th. Hopefully one of those will be great for everybody that we need to pull this meeting off. And if not, we'll look to the beginning of January and find a date then. And then in terms of dates for the CAC to come together again, I assume we don't want to meet Thanksgiving Day. And I am guessing that some folks might already be on vacation on the 22nd. We could still do the 22nd if that is comfortable for at least 50%. But we could also either look at another date in December or just plan on regrouping again in January. I can also send out a doodle poll.
Yeah, I was gonna say, take a poll.
All right, I see Casey giving a thumbs up to that one. So how about this? We will figure out if the 6th, 7th works. If it does, great. We'll send out a doodle poll saying, let's do, and we'll figure out, send out a doodle poll and set up a time, maybe in December. If not, maybe we look at January, but we'll see then, we'll have a good sense also then of like, are we using our time, a time in December for like continued prep, or are we just using, or is that a like debrief time? Because that also might change folks, how folks want to spend their December.
Okay.
Awesome. So we are at 6:47. Is there anything else? Any thoughts anyone has? Things we didn't discuss tonight that should be on the radar? Not seeing too much. I will also then open up to the public. In case any of our members of the public are in attendance and have any thoughts they want to add. Can be a comment, question, recommendation on the dates.
Are there any public meetings on the other project? Would be the water?
I didn't quite catch that.
Are there public meetings on the other project?
Yeah, so there's been, so just in terms of other projects in the area, definitely. So there's been a series of public meetings around the street piece. There's a whole series of meetings on the stormwater. The stormwater element is really a citywide master plan. And so they had a whole series of meetings on the stormwater master plan. I think, Diana, you said you went to all of them, if I remember correctly. And then they're planning another whole series on the stormwater master plan again. And so that's where I want to make sure we're coordinated, just because the tank question is so central to where we are. Yes, in summer we believe very firmly in community meetings. So there are many, which also means that the key dates sometimes have conflicts.
I just want to note that I did throw a couple of links into the chat
Thank you.
about different different food truck things that I've seen. Also, I did look on the MBTA's website and found a press release about the Green Line that says, this is dated, press release dated October 7th, and it's trolley testing along the Medford branch has restarted and will continue until the branch opens for passenger service in late November 2022. So that's, and I can throw that in there as well, but it's just a press release on the MBTA's website. So that's what I could find quickly.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you for pointing those out. Anything else before we break for the evening? As always, the same. Oh, go ahead.
Since you said the city staff are maybe going to be doing some sketches of temporary activities in the park, there is like a giant metal dome in Union Square in New York City that is like 6 feet high and it's like 20 feet wide. And it's just like this big slippery metal dome, and it's in the playground, and the teenagers go crazy for it because you have to run up it really fast. Otherwise you slide back down, and you have to be wearing sneakers or you'll slide off, and people are like getting up there and like pushing each other off and shrieking, and like it's the only problem they had was that it got really hot in the summer because they didn't have a shade cover over it. But I think they fixed that now. But it was just hilarious to watch, and it was like teenagers were going crazy on this thing, and younger kids too. So I've never seen that anywhere else. I thought that was incredibly cool.
I actually saw something like that in Halifax, Nova Scotia, except it was more like a wave shape. And so you could run up the back of it and sit up on the top. And yeah, little kids were running up there, and it was kind of awesome.
There's I was living in Berlin before here for a while, and in Berlin there was a really cool park that was like a very shallow trampoline. Like you couldn't bounce very high, but it was still a trampoline. Like it was like different spots of trampolines. Like you could trampoline from trampoline kind of thing, but they were so shallow that like you only bounced at most a foot. Like you couldn't do some crazy gymnastics thing, but it was very inventive. And I don't know if anyone's seen the Culture House mini trampolines that they travel around with at events. So it's like Fluff Festival, you see them and things, but it's pretty cool. And these are the kinds of folks we want to try and pull in if we can get funding and involved to be like, you know, what are those elements that we can purchase and put on a big piece of gravel? Is it that? Is it a giant tent? Is it like,
and I was thinking it, because paving I know is a pain in the butt to pull up, but another option is like decking, like a temporary wooden, or even just a series of temporary wooden platforms, maybe not just a big thing, but like almost like when you go camping and you don't necessarily have a full tent, but you have platforms that you can set up a tent on, or have a like kind of that midway point between a cabin and a tent. And that way it's a nice flat surface for what we need to do, and would provide some accessibility, because then you could just do ramps up to it, but would not be as hard to dismantle for a developer later on as a paved area might be. So, and you could also run like electrical underneath it and what have you, because if it's actually set up off the ground, then you might have more ability to do that sort of thing. I don't know, thinking top of the head here.
Glamping in Gilman Square.
very cool. I think this is going to be, I think it's just going to be really exciting, right? If we to come back in January, and hopefully we'll be working our way in the ARPA process. I'm going to try and get that solved so we know how much detail we need to be at to get the funding in position. And I'm really hoping that we can pull this off, because the funding would be great. But figure out how much we can really, how much dreaming can we do with a budget? Because this could be really exciting, and this gives us also a little bit of time. So, you know, talk to your neighbors and your kids and your friends, and what would be awesome in a temp scenario.
you could have the high school kids be drawn into the project, into the building side of it. They've done some great projects around the city.
So Ron, I'm gonna see if I can repeat that you were saying, bring the high school kids into it and have them sort of take on a role in designing and building and stuff.
Yeah. The lawn on D is what I'm thinking of is, I like what Diana said about the place in San Francisco. But if we build our own things, like the lawn on D has, where adults just play stuff for adults and young adults and teenagers.
That came up actually when Michelle and Jennifer and I were with the high school. That was like the swings. I don't know. Those kids were all about the like big swings that like adult-sized people can use.
Or actually also in the waterfront area, I was there with a 5-year-old friend, and they have these kind of giant porch swings that are, it's like a like porch furniture, except then hung from a wooden structure. So it's a real, it's a seat that's actually a swing. So I know lawn on D, they're kind of those molded plastic, whatever they are. But this is more like an actual piece of porch furniture. And yeah, because that's a place where kids could hang out. It's a place where kids could, you know, where adults could go and hang out. It's all sorts of ideas.
I'm just taking some notes from what Councilor Clean is saying in the chat. That's got to be selfie friendly.
Yeah, I mean, like if you wanted to do something even just for short term, not, you know, just is if you can, if anybody can bring in some like really, I say anybody, meaning like one of those temporary things, they bring in all kinds of like cool props or whatever. I mean, those things are always a hit when like down.
I'm losing you, Councilor, but that's okay. I am gonna make sure I catch all of these links, Jennifer, and put them in our, so we can put them in our notes. But yeah, this is going to be an exciting conversation is what it sounds like. I feel like there's so many ideas just in 10 minutes. Very cool. All right, it is 6:57. We are scheduled to go till 7. Any other thoughts before we wrap up for the day?
Nope.
All right. So hearing none, I think we might be able to call it a night. Seeing lots of nodding.
Seconded.
All right. Thank you all so much for your time. I'm excited for when we come back and talk about this more fully, and hopefully the ARPA gods will smile upon us and we'll have some money to make this awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Then thanks, Lisa. I'm going to grab your note from the chat there too.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
All right. Ben, I'm going to go ahead and I think I can. Do you want to close it out?
Sure. There we go.
Perfect. All right. See you.